I'm surprised that I can speak at all. Because I'm so proud and I'm so grateful for the last hour or half an hour that we've had to listen to this marvelous woman speaking. She's like a voice of the land. She's a voice of the ancestors. And that quote from Linda Hogan. You, Corinna, you are the result of the love of your people. They're alive in you. And through your devotion to them, you reach us. My reverence for your work and my gratitude are beyond words. Thank you. And I want to thank Steve Costa and Michael Downs and your crew that has brought this together. Because watch out, this is actually what is needed now for our stifled, witless, frightened, automated, benumbed people. You're talking about the living blood of what's coursing through our minds and bodies. And it comes from a source that is inexhaustible, our living earth. What you've started today, I know you wanted more people, but what you're transmitting, what you're making possible is igniting it. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Now, don't you feel it?
Yes.
And it's not going to stop here.
Right.
And we need to bring it into the classrooms. So it's so fine that this is at this wonderful school. I have been in awe of this school through my friend, Annie Pressman. I thought, and Tom, who works with her. Oh, that partnership. And it was a student. Annie tells me that it was a student that first suggested that dump along the side of the school, that hillside where nothing was growing except some rejects of toys, broken machinery and condoms, you believe everything. That could come to be a source of life and beauty and the education of so many students. Is there anybody here who hasn't been out in the Living Lab? That place where the shrine for Ana Costa is, where so many people go to grow food or learn about it, go out and see it. So I had some things I wanted to say, if I could just get myself together. I wanted just to say, because I want to really be short here, how a girl growing up in Manhattan could find that and going to a French school where the hero would be René Descartes. I mean, I was just molded into just sort of the fruit of the Western male-dominated intellectual perspective. And so it's good to know what you have to deal with. And so I have found that that nurtured in me such a capacity to be ready for the next step of civilization beyond the Newtonian Cartesian, and to step into a recognition of a vaster notion of who we are. And I found it in countless ways. I was going to take you through that story. I won't now. It did have to do with my grandfather's farm in western New York. Sacred land, impoverished now. All those small towns. They're ghost towns. They're the only real industry they have for people are prisons. But you don't get to this next stage without walking through the pain and without the reverence and what happens to the broken heart. So it's wonderful to hear Steve just this morning talk about Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher from Vietnam, what he said when he was asked, what do we need to do for the healing of our world? And I know that those asking him were wondering whether he would answer that we should just keep to the cushion, keep meditating, or whether you should get up and climb on the barricades or run for office or write a Dharma book. And none of that did he say. But to hear within yourself the sounds of the earth crying. Did you feel those sounds when you listened to Corinna today? I'm asking you.
Yes.
You heard the earth crying.
Yes.
Now that's a sacred thing. That tells you better than any of the pep talks that you're related deeply. I found that in the Buddha Dharma. I found that in systems theory. I found that even in I found that particularly, let me go back, in coming upon from a movement of way of seeing the world from Norway. The Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss coined the term deep ecology. And he said that this is needed for us now because we're still caught. The environmental movement is shallow ecology. It's still caught in anthropocentric thinking that we do. We clean up the Hudson River, or we clean to protect. There was what? For so that we have a cleaner river, or so that we have soil, better topsoil, so for the comfort and profit of humans. And this blasted opened my mind, along with the pain that was there, with the earth crying inside me. And he said that he invited us all to experience ourselves as earth. That this is what you can do. You can live your life in widening circles where you can reach out, you learn to love your family, you learn to love your community, you learn to love more ethical, just behavior, become a better citizen, and then you learn to love the earth. And you're not that, because then you realize that this earth is alive, that you are capable of experiencing what he called the ecological self. Now that notion of the widening circles was really fitting with me, because I've also grown with a great passion for poetry, and there happens to be a poet I love very much and translate from the original German. And the first poem of his that I loved was just that. I live my life in widening circles. that reach out across the world. Oh, I may not make this last one, but I give myself to it. We know that. We may not make it. Ooh. But that, not being unsure whether you're going to make it or not, is a great source of courage, kind of crazy courage. That's fine. Then you say, I've been circling around God. And I had, because I'd had a Christian childhood, and boy, I was really crazy about God and Jesus for right up to the time I went to seminary and had to study the early church fathers. You talk about the old man. They like to argue over fine points of doctrine. Yeah. Yes, he says, and I turn, how is it? I'm turning around for thousands. I've been circling for thousands of years around this primordial tower. And I still don't know. Am I a falcon? Am I a storm, or a great song? So what I was finding, not having the teachers from your tradition, I was finding that through the deep ecology movement, that there was a great capacity to come home to this incredibly wider sense of the self. And I began a organizing work called deep ecology work, experientially, where people could do. And that I really saw that at work when I went to Australia and met this fellow, John Seed. And he loved the deep ecology work, but he said, Joanna, you've got to take out any shreds of anthropocentrism. He told me about what happened for him when he was standing in defense of the last trees of Gondwana land, the primordial forests of Australia. And he was standing there trying to hold off the illegal logging until they passed a restraining order down in the provincial capital of Sydney. And he and his mates from a Buddhist hippie farm were standing there while the logging companies were there, and the police were arresting the protesters. And at that point, you never know when you're going to have that epiphany, when you wake up to who you really are. He said it happened right then. He realized that he wasn't himself John Seed protecting the rainforest. He was the rainforest protecting herself through this piece of humanity, this humanity that the rainforest had really cradled into existence. That shift in perspective, that shift in identification. Everything we know and are comes out of the earth. You didn't come from Mars, but even that's in this solar system, so you came out of the solar system. You are born and cradled from every part of what you know and are, every atom and every molecule. And in your hand, you just look at it, that has been shaped by time in this earth. We are in the earth because the atmosphere we're breathing is the earth. And to wake up to that now, it brings you such grief and such joy at the same time. And it's a fertile grief and a wild, brave joy. Because you know then what your business, you're so glad that you're born now. When things all so much feels like last minute. It is climate chaos, as Kyle and Vigelia said. And you think, like, boy, I'm so glad that we haven't come to this moment without me on stage. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Because now is the time to let that inner power come through. And I want to tell you about, so I have a good friend who's a Catholic priest. And so he also had to cope with problems, you know, what big tradition, institutionalized tradition for everything, doesn't have some problems. Doctrine of discovery among them. The other preceding that had to do with the Inquisition, very busy in the burning times. Little problems. And so, when I told Matt Fox this when we first met, which was at a dinner party, and I told him I'd just come back from Australia, where John and I had created the Council of All Beings, where it's a ritual where you can step aside from your human identity and allow yourself to be a voice, be adopted temporarily by another life form. And you could speak for an ant or a gorilla or a redwood, and have that step away from that tight, constricted self, and it's really a lot of fun. So Matthew Fox listened to this, and being the brilliant man he is, author of Original Blessing, which is very close to this thinking, he did a Council of All Beings in the next Sunday's Mass that he led. And then it came and he said, I think we can have a movement called Deep Ecumenism, which means all the religious traditions have a common strain, and this can be, and from the mystics to the activists and the prophets and the priests, that this could be in service to the earth when you peel it away. And he wrote a book called The Coming of the Cosmic Christ. And in that book, I read this sentence, and I've been wanting this to say it this morning, and now I'm going to say it. Just a minute. Are you on the edge of your seats? He said and wrote, the Paschal Mysteries. Paschal, you know, means for like Passover, Easter. The Paschal Mysteries of the third millennium will have to do with the death and resurrection of earth, where earth plays the role of Christ crucified. Whoa! That went right through me. Now, even as a Protestant, a liberal Protestant, that took that death and rebirth of crucifixion, resurrection, happens all the time. You can see it in systems theory with the positive disintegration. You see it throughout evolution. Old forms have to come apart, so for evolution and new fresh understandings to happen. And he put this spiritual language in service to our waking up in earth. And so I knew I had to enact this. And I did the first one, called it Easter Mysteries, and brought in people from different traditions down at the Ojai Foundation. And then went, and this time Matt came to northern Scotland, to the Easter Mysteries. And it was in Findhorn Foundation. And on this day, which is the day before Palm Sunday, is this the day before Palm Sunday? Yeah. So it was on the Saturday before Palm Sunday, 225 people gathered for to be together for 10 days till Easter Monday. And we built the whole thing around that sentence by Matt, that truth speaking, to see, well, let's see what happens. And we brought in, we had a day of a Buddhist Vipassana meditation, and we had celebrated a day of Sufism and Sufi dancing from Islam, and we had Orphic, oh boy, they were wild, and Judaism and Passover. We got a little argument there as to whether we were going to have a Passover or wash each other's feet. That was a little. At any rate, and then on Good Friday for the crucifixion, we did the Stations of the Cross. And it was the ways that we went outside, passing 225 of us. And in our home groups, we had selected what the themes were of the crucifixion. We go from place to place of how earth was suffering at our hands. The Chernobyl disaster had recently happened. There was the burning of the Amazon. There was the AIDS Foundation. There was homelessness. There was species extinction. You name it. And we would go from one to the other and grieve together and singing the whole time a beautiful Russian form of the Kyrie eleison. It was one of the most moving experiences of my life, and I have a big, long life. So we have this, in this time, we're going to be part of and witness a coming together of all that is dear, all that calls for reverence from us, to bring forth the deep wells of our gratitude. Gratitude for our ancestors and gratitude for the future beings. Because they're here in this moment of great danger. The ancestors, their blood is flowing through your veins. And where are the future ones? They're in your body. They're in your gonads and in your, what's the...
Ovaries. The ovaries.
The eggs. Fallopian tubes, they're in you. The future is in you. And in this time of tremendous danger, I was so glad that Kyle gave us some of it. We need to remember, because around us we're living in a soup of normalcy. But it's not normal. Things are coming apart at the most foundational level. And so we have to make almost a religious duty of reminding ourselves of that. And not being afraid of sounding like a prophet of doom. But let that heart, as I always say, the heart that breaks open can hold the whole universe. We're that big. So we can feel them right now. It's getting that dicey for us. And I want to close now, because I'm going to close. I know that I should be quick. But I want to read a letter from a boy who, actually it's a paper he wrote, who was 15. He just had his 15th birthday, and he went to, it's when you, Outward Bound. Thank you, I got that from you. And in the Outward Bound, he had a solo. I know about this because I gave him that treat. I said, when you get to 15, because he's my grandson. Halfway through an outward bound trip in the car, so he was getting ready for his freshman year, or 9th grade in high school. So I'm reading this because so that Michael and all of you know, again, what you do in a way, that how ready the kids are. Mm-hmm. Halfway through outward bound trip in the Colorado Rockies, our instructor sent us out on a 3-day solo, explaining it would be a time for silent reflection at a small, isolated site. To avoid distraction, we only brought essentials. No books, no watches, no cameras. We could take clothes and a sleeping bag, a tarp, a notebook, a vacuum bag containing a few nuts and crackers. I was dismayed. My Uncle Jack had told me that there would be no food. I wanted to be just like him, scraping lichen off the rocks. I decided I wouldn't even open my rations. The next morning, we were led to our sites in silence. Once I had finished reading the albuterol inhaler and my sunscreen bottle, I had 2.5 days to reflect. Not eating was difficult, but it kept away the boredom and frustration that characterized the other students' solos. Weakened by hunger, sitting still and reflecting was just about the most appealing thing I could think of. Any kind of prolonged action, even writing, left me feeling unwell. Many thoughts came during my solo, most now forgotten. What I do remember with striking clarity are my thoughts on the second night. Sitting a yard or so from my tarp, I gazed at the trees and bushes, rocks and dirt, all bathed in silver. Taking in this beauty, I was overcome by a terrible fear and sadness of what the future might hold for this planet. I thought about the haze that often blankets San Francisco, about fracking and deforestation and the many other ways that we are abusing our planet. After a long while, my chest heavy, I lay down. The stars were the brightest I had ever seen. As I looked at them, the world seemed to fade away. I didn't hear the trickling creek or feel the cold. The sky took on new depth. It didn't look like a dome with holes poked in it. It looked immense, infinitely complex and layered. As I watched the stars move across the sky, wondering which were galaxies, planets, or something yet to be discovered, I was hit by a truth I had heard often before but never truly understood. The Earth is an incredibly tiny part of the universe. Discovering that my world and my life were such a small part of a greater reality did not, as one might assume, rob me of a sense of meaning. In fact, I found a greater meaning and reassurance. The universe in all its beauty will go on, whatever happens to me and my planet. Since my solo, this reassurance has allowed me to face climate change and other frightening realities without shutting down. My memories of the solo are characterized by gratitude for the insight I was given And also for the willpower I discovered I had in choosing not to eat. I'm going to close with that. We belong to this universe. There is power that can work through us. We will never, whatever happens, we will never be separated from this living beauty of a planet. Never. It is our larger self. We're home. And so we can let flow through us so much love and so much courage and so much life. Thank you.